Everyone loves having a hero until the hero needs help.
Well, hey there, Indy, turn your dial. Dapper Don's here to make you smile with a co-host sharp and riff so true. We've got the laughs, the rants, the view. What's going on? Oh, what's the word? Indy's the city where we'll be heard. From Monument Circle to Broad Ripple on. What's going on with Dapper Don? So grab your coffee, Hoosiers, and let's get to it. 'Cause we're in the house!
What's going on? It's Dapper Don, and I'm excited to welcome you all back. When you spend your life being the rock for other people, you eventually encounter weights that even you crack under. And that's just a part of life. We've all been taught to expect that kind of thing. But none of us are ever taught what happens when the rock needs support. Who's there to repair the rock, patch it up, maybe give the rock a break so it can heal itself? No one, that's who. I'm reminded of Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. This benevolent plant gave of itself to everyone until it had nothing left, and for a long time went without even a single person thinking to get it a fucking drop of water. I'm also reminded of the sad fact that we as humans often consume way more water than we replenish. Our guest tonight is a dark fantasy author who's been the rock, the tree, and the river. See what I did there? Meet the creator of the Vaelorinverse, a series of stories about grief, depression, trauma, loss, and the ultimate tragedy of having to deal with all of this alone. Everybody welcome Justin Anderson to the show. It's great to have you, Justin.
Great to be here, Don.
All right, so tell me, when did you first start to notice you were struggling with depression?
It would have been about, around 2009. It was when my grandmother, we found out that she had cancer, colon cancer, stage 4, around 2008. And going into my senior year, that was my first real experience with death, someone close. I've had distant family members die, but my grandmother grew up in the house with me. She was the very first person to hold me when I was born. And so this was my first experience with death up close, someone I really was close with. And it just took its toll in growing up during that time where, man, we don't cry, boys are supposed to be tough. I didn't really know how to deal with it. And what I thought was me just having, angry outbursts or being angry all the time was just my way of masking the depression. And I didn't really have words for it or know what it was at that time. Because again, whenever I felt sad, I got angry because, boys aren't supposed to be sad or cry. So it started, around 2009, but I didn't really understand that those mood swings, those different things were depression to about a few years after that, about 2010, 2011.
Absolutely. And if I remember 2009 correctly, mental health was not a priority for a lot of people.
No, by far not. It's changed so much. I feel how they push mental health now, and being in high school, you're dealing with high school things. Because she passed my senior year, so you're dealing with that, and you're dealing with graduations. And I ain't gonna lie, I wasn't the best student. I wasn't bad referrals type, but I always felt like I had another year to make up the grade. So it really affected me when she passed, where if I would actually graduate or not. That became a motivational push to make sure I graduated, and I had no intentions on letting anything hold me back from it.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to segue into, kind of how did people treat you once they found out that depression was what you were going through?
It's really interesting, especially within the Black community, we don't really talk about mental health, really. I had family members that just wanted to pray it away, the real religious look on it. I had other family members, especially the males, who just didn't know how to interact with it. It's just kind of the punch to the shoulder or the arm and toughen up type movement. And my mother, she worked in mental health field. She worked in the mental health field for, well, now it would be 30 plus years, but back then it was still, about 10, 15. So she understood what was happening, but she just lost her mother. So she's going through all the emotions she's going through and trying to cope with that and trying to be a support system for me. And it just didn't really work out that well. So I spent a lot of time just being angry for a few years of, how the people around me, they didn't understand, what I was feeling. I even mistake, the way that my sister was handling, because she was a nurse at the time. She's a nurse practitioner now. And she understood what was coming. So, she was putting money aside. She was working and she was, putting money for the funeral up. And I just felt like she didn't care. So there was a whole lot of different things that I made a mistake on. And then the people around me, the way they were treating me was either, oh, you're just not believing in God hard enough or praying hard enough, or it was just, toughen up. It wasn't really that understanding of, as a male, 17, 18, I could be going through some real, painful stuff.
Absolutely. Even in going through that pain, I noticed a lot of the themes in your work is that isolated pain that no one else can access, mainly because no one else tries to access it. But it's even in that pain, these are people who are still trying to give of themselves. Did you ever find yourself still having to give of yourself even then? And if so, how?
Definitely so. I had high school relationships, and realistically, it's a lot easier sometimes to give of yourself and focus on other people's issues and to focus on your own. Focusing on your own issues means that you have to come to some level of acceptance of whatever you're dealing with, whether it's, the loss of someone, whether it's your own failures, or for some people, even success could be scary, but you have to come to some level of acceptance of that when you're dealing with your own. So I found myself easily being wrapped up in other people issues. Some of the girls I may have dated at the time, they had, issues within their home. And I felt myself being there and tending to, their wounds because it took my mind off of my own. And I won't say that it was necessarily a requirement. At that time, I will say it felt like a requirement, but talking to you right now, looking back on it, it was more of a choice because it meant that I didn't have to sit and face what I was dealing with.
And, I kind of want to ask, were there many people that were very comforting to you in the deep way that these things often need to be comforted whenever you needed them?
Nah, that was that was definitely a shift. During that time, I found out, the girl I was, let's see, I think we started dating probably like 10th grade roughly. During the time my grandmother was, you know, or well, yeah, she was being just clear about it. I ended up finding out she was cheating on me, and it was a whole interesting situation. It really shifted my view because I realized, that sometimes you can be there for other people and you can give of yourself in ways that you normally wouldn't. And then at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that someone's going to reciprocate that in the same way. And that that was a real eye opener for me, um, because I kind of have that mindset of, if me and you cool, then I got your back, and you got my back. But it was pretty clear, and I learned a lot from that relationship of that's not always going to be the case. So you may deal with somebody else stuff and take their weight and then still have to deal with your own weight. And now you've basically doubled your load, and that gets hard. It's a real hard thing to do, and a lot of people do it, and some people do it without even realizing it.
Yeah. And, something that you've said that's really resonated with me is basically that you can pour all yourself into filling somebody up. And then the moment that you require to be filled back up, they tell you to go to a faucet. It's like,
Exactly.
so it's interesting. And it's a sad fact of life that, people always often just go with what's convenient. They don't necessarily think about these deeper aspects. But I know that you do, which is why I want to fast forward a bit. And now you're sitting down, you about to write your generic fantasy novel. But as you've said before, your depression took over the process. Did that happen all at once, or was it a gradual sort of thing?
It was kind of in stages. I sat down, I'm like, okay, everybody's doing side hustles, of course, because, prices are expensive. So I'm like, what can I do? What am I good at? And going through my mind, I realized I never learned how to be like super handy with my hands or anything because, we grew up, we weren't dirt poor, but we still didn't have a lot of money. So it was kind of one of those where a lot of people tinker with things and they'll break them and then they'll fix them. And it was like, we ain't got the money to break anything. So I'm not going to touch it. We got it
Right.
working. We got it working. And I didn't have, male figures around to teach me because at that time, gender roles were more assumed. You had like the G.I. Joe, then you had Barbie, the Easy
Yep.
Bake Oven, and Tonka trucks, and it was all about fitting within that role. So, normally males would be the one that would do the mechanical and the physical stuff. So I didn't have that. And I'm like, well, I've always seemed to be good at writing ever since I was little. So this should be a pretty easy, side hustle. Everybody likes the little fantasy stories. At that time, I was listening to Pocket FM, and most of the stories on there was, the typical fantasy stories: magical sword, hero, defeat the demon, everybody lives happily ever. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I sit down, I started it, and probably the first 2 or 3 chapters kind of went well. And it started to become more complicated. My characters, the way that they function within my story, I started noticing, okay, this character's mimicking like someone who has abandonment issues, and this character, has survivor guilt. Um, and it started off in that stage. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't affect it. One thing that I didn't know during that time about the writing world, because I, wrote a lot and I wrote most of my life, but I never actually tried to be part of like a writing group or community. So after I started to realize, okay, this is kind of taking a different turn, I was like, well, let me try to be part of a writing community and see how they function, see what I can glean from them, learn from them. That was kind of where things took a turn for stage 2. And I did not know how toxic writing communities can be.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they can be worse than gaming communities. It was brutal.
And see, the worst part about writing communities is that where gaming communities have your elitist pieces of shit, writing communities have elitist pieces of shit that think that they're beneficial to society.
Exactly, exactly. They felt like they know everything, like they can tell you whatever. And I've never had any formal writing, any type of formal writing training, or I
I
didn't go
can't tell.
through classes. I just always felt kind of like I wanted my writing to like speak to people. Like I said, as far back as I can remember, even when I was like first, second grade, and you're doing like little Halloween stories, few words, the ghost said boo and different things. I remember, mowing over for almost like a whole class day of how to make my boo sound like, like the ghost would, the boo, like that fluctuation.
Yes.
Most people, they just write a whole bunch of O's and things. And it took me a long time, but what I ended up coming up with was to draw my letters like wavy. So it just
Mm-hmm.
naturally gave that mental
Who?
understanding. Exactly. And I remember my teacher during like, the show and tell, like the open house, talking to my mom about it. And she was just so over the moon on the fact of how I did the lettering. When she was describing it to my mom and showing her, she said boo the way that I imagined it in my mind. And that was like a really pivotal moment for me. Um, so fast forwarding to, being part of the writing community, I've always written just instinctually off the top of my head. Like I don't plan my stories. It just kind of flows out of me. And um it's not quite the same as like a pantser where they kind of have a idea roughly. I tend to feel or more in I feel like I do more of a method writing. Like if you're familiar with method acting, but where they like get so engrossed in the role where they like physically start to become that character and they like almost have to separate themselves because it's like unhealthy. I get that way with my writing. When I'm writing a very traumatic piece, it's almost like, well, it's not even almost like I can trigger my depression and I have to like pull myself out and have okay, let's separate my reality from this story now because it's affecting my mood, it's affecting my depression, my ability to be productive. I still need to go to work. And when I was in the writing community, I didn't have the words for it at that time because this was all new to me. And they were like, "Okay, are you a plotter?" I'm like, "No, I don't plot anything." "Oh, so you're a pantser?" I'm like, I'm not quite that, but I don't know how to explain it." And it just went downhill. They were just like, "Well, you have to be one of these, otherwise you're not a real writer. You're not this, you're not that." And then when I got into the conversation of a lot of my influences are like anime, manga, real life. I didn't really pull or glean a lot of insight from actual novels. They
Right.
just, I found some that resonated with me on a very deep level, like The Outsiders, A Child Called It. And there was a few more, but like I can say to this day, I've never read like Harry Potter. I didn't even know who Brian Sanderson was until like last year. Like it just they never deeply appealed to me. But I understood how to write in a way that would make you feel and draw you in. And when
Yes.
I mentioned that, oh man, you thought they lined up with pitchforks and I was going to be burnt at the stake. It was horrible, and that led into like the stage two of my trauma. Uh, I was I didn't actually even know that I didn't deal with this trauma at the time. So kind of being like ostracized and, made the black sheep. When I was growing up, I was like one of two black people in my neighborhood. So, I grew up being called the N word, having to fight. It wasn't even a choice. It was like you either fight or you come home with your ass whooped every day, clothes torn and stuff. So I had to fight. And you realize that does do something to you where you get used to it and you rationalize the trauma without thinking about it. It becomes okay, well, this is what it is to be black. This is what it is to live in this type of environment. And my rationalization is what made it seem fine until I experienced that situation. And next thing I know, now I'm in this, regressive state of feeling very vulnerable, very alone because, of how I grew up, not having really anybody that believed in me or agreed with me. So
Right. Like again, themes in your work of pain that other people just can't understand because you're unable to understand it because they just won't. They just will not try.
Exactly. And that led to, you know, the deeper layers of it. At that point, it became really the whole story just changed at that point. Grief became the hollowborn, which are the monsters of my story. And I use that term loosely because they're not really, you know, monsters per se. They're a cause and effect of the world building up too much grief and it's not having a way to dispel or to be handled. And, you know, the causation of it are the hollowborn, which unfortunately naturally affect the world in a negative way. And all of that started to unfold in the way that, you know, mental health started to wrap itself within my lore of the whole thread system and the fact of, you know, as you do things to support your mental health in a positive way, you know, your thread will heal itself and it will strengthen. As if you do things that are negative, like, you know, like I mentioned earlier, suppressing these emotions, you know, dealing with vulnerable emotion by covering up with anger, your threads begin to fray. And all of this affect the way that you function and how the world functions around you. And from that experience and realizing this, you know, bringing up my childhood trauma, it started to take that shape after that.
You know, speaking of the fact that people weren't understanding, I want to get into another aspect of depression, and this is going to be a really heavy part of the episode, I think. And that's the fact that most people don't understand it at all. And I want to clarify in the next section, this isn't meant to shame anyone who doesn't know how to deal with their own or others' depression. I mean, for God's sakes, at least 30% of all Americans deal with some form of it, not counting those that either didn't report or didn't know it.
Yep.
And it can be a lot to deal with, but that still doesn't justify ignorance, callousness, or generic cardboard responses, which I found we've evolved to. We've gone from just man up now to just get help to aw, poor baby, just staying on that surface level, not wanting to engage deeper with another person's pain, especially ones who are willing to engage with yours.
True.
So I just want to talk about why just get help ain't enough. What are some common misconceptions about depression that you see a lot? And how does your writing kind of take those myths and, for lack of a better term, shits on them?
Well, a lot of the common misconceptions I see is people just assume depression is just being sad. When you mention that you have depression, people just assume, well, everybody gets sad. I get sad sometimes, so I have it. Or they assume the ones who at least understand that it's not just a sad moment, that it's longer. If you know, have a depression and you're having it for like a weekend, which, you know, there's different forms of depression. There's short term, long term, seasonal. Then it becomes this case of you're not out long enough, so you don't really have depression. Because if you had depression, then you would be closed up and huddled in bed, lights off. It's like that's not how all depression, you know, presents itself, number one. Number two, you know, there are stages of it. And that's one thing that I had to learn how to do was read my stages. Like I now understand myself on how bad I'm getting because, you know, it'll go from kind of a loss of interest in interacting with people to now I'm having a hard time getting out of bed and wanting to go to work to I start to have these irrational thoughts of, you know, my mom or, you know, my wife, my kids, they wouldn't want, you know, they don't really care about me. They don't want me around. You know, I'm just a breadwinner and I just bring in money for people. And it's like, even right then, my son could come in and just give me a hug out of nowhere. And I can understand physically that those words I'm thinking are not true, but they still feel so true to me that I can't get my mind to accept it. And once he leaves, it's like, oh, he just hugged me for he wanted something. And going to the next level, I'll hit this level of I'm not suicidal. I call it like passive suicide, where it's not that I'm actively attempting to do so, but I'm sitting here and I may be driving and I'm like, if that semi truck was to just swerve into my lane and take me out, at least they'll get my life insurance money.
Right.
And
Like, you're not, it's like, it's not screaming at you, but you are getting calls from the void. Collect.
exactly, exactly. And I start to have these just passive thoughts on, well, if this was to happen and I died, then okay, and then I haven't hit the bottom stage too many times, but then from that stage, I understand that it does go into actually planning and putting together a plan for active suicide. So I've had to learn to understand myself on these levels because it lets me know, okay, I need to seek help. And help comes in different forms. And this is where, with my writing, I try to kind of explore those things because not everybody enjoys actual therapy. Some of them feel it's too clinical. They feel like they're just there for the money. It is their job. And then some of them feel like they can't understand what I'm actually dealing with because they're not dealing with it. My concept becomes to take stories that I'm hearing that I'm dealing with and that I see others experiencing and kind of just name that weight and have people understand that weight of it. I'm not saying I'm going to fix it for you. And I'm not saying I can make it better, but I'm saying that I can at least say that I see you and I see what
Right.
you're carrying. And that can make all the difference. Not all the time do someone actually want you to fix their issue. They just want to know that they're seen in the fact that they're struggling is acknowledged. That's what my writing does, is acknowledge those weights of caregivers, of nurses who are you know, dealing with patients that they may lose and they're feeling at fault, or caregivers who are working with elderly and they're seeing every single holiday, this person gets no visit from family members. They get no calls from family members. But when that person passes away, all the family there, because they're wanting to claim what's left over. They're wanting to know what they get out of the will. This takes an impact on people mentally, emotionally, and
Yes.
physically, but it's never really acknowledged out in the world. We may hear things about police officers and children sometimes, those are the type of things. But as far as like the mental health and different occupations of, caregivers, of nurses, of teachers, firefighters is one that's really not talked about. They have a higher suicide rate than police officers in active duty. These things that are not mentioned. And so my goal is to build through my world a place that says, I'm not trying to fix you. I'm not trying to rush you. If you need to sit here a little bit longer, then we can sit here. But I at least want you to understand that you're seen.
Absolutely. And, there's something powerful you said about the common misconceptions for depression, too. And that's that people think about it in only one way. And it's like when you're depressed, you're not the sad emoji. In fact, a lot of the time, a good chunk of the time, before you've given up, you're angry. You're angry
Yep.
at the world. You're angry at people that put you through this. You're angry at the fact that you've spent your entire life giving to others and nobody can even give you an hour of their time to just sit with you, not fix it, not talk at you, not lecture, just sit with you and hear you without trying to insert their own bullshit religious or personal, I don't want negativity bullshit philosophies on you. To sit and listen to somebody going through that is powerful. Or,
Correct.
which really pisses me off, telling somebody to just get help. I see that a lot online. Just get
Yep.
help. Just go to therapy. It's easy. Well, I think they're saying something else under those words, and I feel like you do too. What do you think they're saying under those words, just get help?
I think they're just taking and condensing the fact of their life and how, simplistic they may have it and trying to layer it over yours. And what you said right there really resonated with me because I see that online. In the other portion, that I see that really pisses me off is the one where it's like, well, I have it and I got over it, so why can't you? You're not trying hard enough.
Hmm.
And I hate that with a fucking passion because it's like, just because you dealt with something, you're trying to make this equivalent of that our life's the same. You may come from a family that has financial wealth and means. I'm coming from the gutter where I didn't know if I was going to eat every night. And you're trying to equate your level of trauma to mine. And it's like, that's not how it works. And if we, dig deeper on that, you people don't even understand that, or I won't even say they don't understand. They don't think about the fact that neurologically we got different DNA. So the way something may affect you may be completely different from how it impacts me. And that leads into the whole just get help. And it's like the way that we process help, the way that we need help can be completely different. Some people are okay with therapy. I've seen a lot of veterans who do not like clinical therapy. Now they can do, and I can never remember the name of it, but they can do the one with the horses. They'll do that therapy. And there's different other forms of therapy, but they will not go and talk to an actual therapist. That's just not the way that they are wired to feel help. So just get help is just like taking everyone individual needs and just trying to put them all in the same boat and say, this is the only way that you can actually get help to be successful. And that's not right. That's not true.
Absolutely. And, just to kind of bring in the other viewpoint here, I have made an episode called The Twisting of Therapy Speak where I've said just because you're going through something doesn't give you the right to cause harm, doesn't give you the right to hurt other people. But a lot of people equate hurt and harm to people with mental illnesses doing what people with mental illnesses do. If somebody is depressed and not dancing in your face like a goddamn circus clown, that is not the same thing as somebody claiming to have avoidant attachment and mentally abusing someone. Those are two different ballparks.
True.
So, yeah, I just think that I just think that that's kind of enraging, and I know that you get frustrated with that too. And what do you think is the reason for that? What do you think makes it so frustrating?
I think because when you can look and you can see, or you've been that person that experiencing that judgment and or that treatment, I think, it just sets you off because it's like you are able to kind of equate or understand that pain of what that does and how that completely doesn't help, how that makes things so much worse, even though you're packaging it up like it's a birthday gift or something. And it's like, no, this isn't what I needed. And the other issue with it is that when they frame it that way, it honestly turns it into almost like a situation where you almost have to accept it if it's done in front of people, because if you say you disagree, then everybody think you're ungrateful. Well, this person was just trying to help you. They were being nice. No, the hell they weren't.
No,
What they said was highly offensive. And just because you didn't find it offensive and that you aren't one of the people with, this particular mental illness or that's going through these types of problems, you can't tell how I should feel about what they said and how they presented it to me.
exactly. And then there's the whole other side of it. You go from people being too distant to people who overreact and start treating you like you're made of glass. Are they being callous, do you think, but in a different way?
Oh, that one I always find hard. And what I always think about when people talk about that side of it, always come and I always think about the veterans because, you'll spend these veterans, they go to war in, not that they want to go and shoot people or do anything like that, but, sometimes defending their life, defending the country does lead to them having to kill people. But as soon as they go to, a doctor or if they're in the room with anybody and they mention, you know, I had to kill before, it's like everyone immediately goes quiet and all of a sudden everybody's on eggshells and like, well, don't make that person mad. He'll kill you. And it's like, that is not the same situation. You know, it's not like they just got mad and snapped off. It was a kill or be killed situation. This is not the same. This isn't, you know, this is a completely different situation that you're in. That's extremely isolating when you do that to people, which, you know, basically leads into the whole making all of this so much worse for somebody. That isolation also leads to further depression, further, you know, problems and increasing mental health issues.
Absolutely.
And and it's really like one of those where you deal with people and you don't want to just assume they're being like callous or being an asshole, but then it's like
What
once
else
you
can you call it?
exactly.
It's like I don't want to assume you're being the biggest dipshit in the world, but you leave me little recourse.
And that's where it is. And it's you try hard, but it's like once you talk to someone once or twice after that, then yeah, I do be like, okay, now you're just doing this because you're doing this, you know.
Right.
And you just chose not to learn. You don't even care about correcting yourself or your behavior. You
Nope.
just, whatever you feel, you just want to continue down this line of blind ignorance.
Which I tell you, again, I've experienced that before. I've been on the receiving end of it. And yeah, trust me, people with depression want to punch you people too. Just as much as we want to punch the people who don't understand, we want to come for you too. We just know that it will be frowned upon a little bit more, so we usually don't. So just kind of watch that, because especially with men who grew up, who were veterans or who grew up back then, treating them like they're made of glass is an insult to their manhood. And most men are ready to fight over that. You just
True.
people
That is very
it's
true.
like it's like, you know, you can't pretend to be considerate, because then that's also inconsiderate.
Correct. That's where I feel like people need to, you know, approach these things differently. And the other thing that I see is not taking when someone is able to articulate that they have, you know, a mental illness and these things affect their mental illness in a negative manner, is for people to take that seriously and avoid doing things. You know, I remember hearing a story about, there being a veteran, in a mental health center. And he explained that, he has PTSD. He was like, please, if you ever need to get my attention, do not grab me from behind. Come around
Mhm.
front or call me from a distance, but do not grab me. And of course, there's always that one that feels like, oh, well, they don't really mean it. They're not going to do this or that. And the person decided to grab them from behind. Now, when he grabbed and choked the hell out of them and did almost kill them, now he's the bad guy because he reacted, within what he felt was really happening. He wasn't seeing this in the same time frame or timeline like you are. It's, I'm pulled back into where it's fight or be killed. And you deliberately did something I told you not to do. And now when you get choked out and almost killed, now you want me arrested. You want me removed. You think I'm a danger, but you made me this way. And I'm not a danger to anybody, but your stupid ass because you did this.
Right. Right. It's like, and that's just the kind of way it works with mental illness. Is like, if somebody is telling you, because a lot of people with mental illnesses do tell you what they need in their own way. You have to listen. You have to listen to the words. You have to listen to what's under the words. You have to look at the actions and judge logically what they need. It's actually, it's not easy to do, but it's not impossible if you step out of yourself and put yourself in the shoes of someone else. But with that, I think it's about time we take a short groove break. It's been a heavy discussion so far, and I think a lot of what we said so far just needs time to germinate. So when we come back, we're actually going to continue this discussion by talking about just how callous people can get to an almost dark extent, and then we'll talk about how dark fantasy helps you in ways that someone telling you to man up never could. This discussion is going to be a 1-2 punch on your soul, so you don't want to miss it. You're watching What's Going On with Dapper Don. Stay tuned.
How does it feel living in a cage? Dress rehearsal with no escape. Get on set, you've a part to play. When someone else is the director, you're borrowing your fame. Read your lines, say your phrase. Don't be loud, know your place. Intermission, take a break, then get right back on that stage. Take your time, now speed up. Try to rise, now you're fucked. Identify with my design, you'll never be enough. But when you go to sleep at night, when you turn off the lights, when you look deep inside, do you feel satisfied? The world is a stage and the stage is the world of entertainment. Careful arrangement. Don't go off script or you'll be in danger. The world is a stage and the stage is the world. But what's left for you if you're not being true? When even if you break, it's gotta be on cue. It's call time, better be off books. Script memorized, you gotta have the look. It's a full house, they're all here to see. You're mine now, my property. So stage right, go where I say. I'll give you hell if you get in my way. And cheat out, they wanna see you smile while you die internally. But when you go to sleep at night, when you turn off the lights, when you look deep inside, do you feel satisfied? The world is a stage and the stage is the world of entertainment. Careful arrangement. Don't go off script or you'll be in danger. The world is a stage and the stage is the world. But what's left for you if you're not being true? When even if you break, it's gotta be on cue. I feel the urge to break the mold. No longer wanna play this role. So now I'll take back the control before this play takes its toll. I'll break the chains, I'll set the pace. I'll go up stage and strike the ashtray. Tear up the script, set it on fire. This dress parade will end in pie.
You're tuned in to What's Going On with Dapper Don. Don't touch that dial. And we're back. For those of you just now tuning in, we just got through talking about Justin's early life and how depression crept up on him, as well as what prompted him to pick up a pen and turned it into compelling and raw stories, as well as what people don't understand when they say, just get help to those who struggle with depression. We talked about a lot so far. Now I want to tackle another aspect of it that's going to hurt, but we got to talk about it. Before we get into this section, I'm going to put a trigger warning here. I don't normally do this, but we will be discussing matters of a rather serious and dark nature. You've been warned. So, to start this section off, 13 million adults from 18 on up have been reported to have suicidal thoughts at one point in their lives as of 2023. And again, this is not counting those that either did not report, did not say, or whatever the circumstance was. Of those numbers, 1.5 million have acted on it. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in those 18 to 29 years old. What do those statistics tell you, Justin, about how we treat people who have reached this point?
Those statistics tell me that they aren't being heard or seen. And I think those numbers are really telling, because all it takes sometimes is just knowing one person, heard you. And this brings to mind a story that centers right around that. When I was younger, my mom, and this back when, we had house phones that did have a cord. There's a lot of people who don't know about that. But, we had a landline. And my mom received a call by accident. This dude was trying to call his father, and he just kind of let all his emotion out on that line with my mom. And she stood on that line with him, didn't know him, even to this day, she never met him or don't know who he was. But she stayed on that line with him. And at the end of it, he thanked her. And he told her, he was like, I accidentally dialed your number because your number is a one number difference from my dad's. And I was calling him because his dad was homophobic and, the son was homosexual and his dad didn't accept him. And he was like, I was calling my dad to tell him he no longer has to worry about having a homosexual son. And I was going to kill myself. And he was like, but talking to you and the fact that you didn't care whether I was homosexual or not, that changed, that was an impactful moment for him. Now, I can't say whether he went on to follow through or not. But at least in that moment, he told my mom that he, didn't want to kill himself anymore. And that one act of just listening and just being present for someone, letting them know they seen, could have changed that young man's life.
Yeah. And people do this infuriating thing where they think that they equate the act of committing suicide to like some kind of toughness competition or some kind of like do it pussy you won't sort of thing. Like maybe if you call their bluff, they'll stop. But somebody reaching out for help when they're experiencing that sort of thing is not begging for attention. It's people doing what people naturally do when they're in a situation like that. Y'all do understand that nobody wants to be suicidal. Nobody wakes up one day and just says, "You know what? My life is fantastic. I'm surrounded by so many great people. I'm just going to shoot myself in the head." That's not how this works. So, and nobody wakes up, if they're experiencing suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, they're not thinking, "I'm going to manipulate these people and get all the attention." They're thinking, "Who can I talk to in that moment that can make me feel like life isn't all gray, like life is worth living?" And
Yep.
if you aren't that person to talk to and they're on their last legs, then guess what you've just inadvertently done? And yes, I'm putting it that way because a lot of you need to hear it that way.
Yeah. I mean, people don't understand that, sometimes that final call isn't, it's a call for help.
Mm-hmm.
They're just looking, like I said, to be seen or heard. And, some people think, well, this person, they just want attention. They're not really going to do it. Or in some cases, some people are just like, I don't have the time to deal with your problems. And it's like, I'm not asking you to fix my problems. I just want to know that not everything in my world is wrong. And I think one of the biggest issues with it is for society is that they can't understand how your mind twists realities when you're at that point. They look and they'll see, well, you got a nice home, you got this, you got that, or you shouldn't feel that bad because there's some people who got it worse. But as we talked about earlier on in the show, your mind will take and twist things. You can truly know this isn't the worst situation ever, but once you're in that state of depression, there's nothing worse than what you're going through in the world.
It's like, yeah, I know there are probably people chained in a basement starving right now, but I've never experienced that, so I have no frame of reference to be grateful for anything.
And when you don't have that frame of reference, again, your bottom is what you've experienced through your life. And our bottoms may
Yes.
be different. For some people, it may be honestly just failing a simple test. That could be their very bottom. And for others, it may be losing their home, being homeless, and like 9 other things that have to stack on before they feel they're at their bottom. But it varies for everybody. And trying to just assume everyone fits this same mode of, well, you need to have this number of things go wrong in your life before you hit the bottom is what leads to these misconceptions and so many people not being heard,
Yep.
in my opinion.
And, it often makes me wonder because sometimes I like to look at the other side. Like, why does everybody, especially those closest to your parents, friends, partners, why do they seem to do the exact wrong things whenever a crisis like this arises? Why do they almost seem to want to provoke you?
And that's really hard to say because I definitely been on the side of that. And dealing with my wife, it took, honestly, it took a couple years for us to get to the point where she could actually accept that when I'm in a depressive state and when I'm dealing with my depression, and I tend to have more of a seasonal depression, like
Right,
I
right.
get worse during the winter and stuff. That it's not like I'm choosing to just think this way. It's not that I love you or love my family any less, but my mind is legitimately just, for a lack of better explanation, bending reality differently. chemical imbalance in my brain, if we want to be more scientific, it's creating this false perception and narrative. It's not something that I can honestly control. I can try to do some things to mitigate it. And then, you get into whether it's medicating, self medication, some other things on the sideline there. But I can do some things to try to mitigate it. But that doesn't mean that it's going to not happen at all. And it took a little bit to get her to understand what I needed from her during that time wasn't to get mad at me if I wasn't affectionate or to honestly just leave me be either. Because there's some people who just assume, well, you're depressed, so I'm gonna leave you be, because that made me feel more isolated, more alone. What I personally needed from her was for her just to honestly be around me. Like, you ain't got to say anything, but if I'm laying in bed all day, if you come and you just hang out in the bedroom by me, that really does make a difference. If it's sunny outside, because, getting rays of sun does help with depression.
Yes.
You know, I may tell you no, and I may want to fight you on it somewhat, but, pull me out of bed, try to get me to go outside. But like I told her, the worst thing you can do is to get mad at me, because it validates what I feel already, that I'm just a burden on everybody around me. And then the second thing that you can do that is horrible is just to leave me alone, because once you leave me alone so much, I already feel alone. Again, it validates what I feel. And then eventually I start to feel even more so like I don't matter. And I understood, she thought she was helping, but, these are the conversations that sometimes need to be had. And people on the other side who don't have mental illness, even though you can't wrap your mind around it fully, you just kind of need to hear it and accept that this is what the other person really is experiencing. And I can say, after those couple of years when she got, through the rough times of it, I mean, she really has helped me it's been a life-saving difference for me.
And, that's kind of what the real comfort looks like. It's not the generic shit. It's not it's not the doctor's orders. It's not the, oh, stay away from him. Real comfort that would actually de-escalate the situation is just being there. A lot of people will say, well, you're enabling it. No, that's, again, not how that works. What enables it is treating somebody like they're not good enough, because
Yep.
then they're already thinking that. So then if you leave them alone, they're just going to continue thinking that. Then it spirals into paranoia. Then it spirals into anger. And then before you know it, you do have a depressed person that has lashed out because of because of abandonment. Abandonment doesn't make anything better. You could be having the best day ever and you don't get a text from your girlfriend and that fucks you up. So what do you think somebody with depression who's all alone is going to do?
Exactly. And, we're not alone purely in the context of, just nobody being around. We're alone in our head in a sense.
Mhm.
And I think, this is something that is really important. In fact, right now I actually have, a project that I'm trying to put together that is almost ready, because I wanted to release it during Mental Health Month of May. Because we talked a lot about on this current podcast, we talked about how, the current way that things are pushed out, just get help or just do
Yeah.
this, it's honestly almost like it's honestly toxic. And the other thing
Mhm.
that I see that it seems helpful, but I feel like it is toxic to a degree, is the over positivity, mental health stuff. Okay, it's all right, it's rainy, but it's going to be more sunny days. And, every church you see dealing with mental health is just, you had a hard time, but everything's going to be better. There's nothing that acknowledges, hey, you're having a hard time, and truly, you may not feel better for a week, 2 weeks to a month. And this person next to you may be okay after a couple of days, but you don't have to be on that time frame. You know, everybody takes a different time frame. And that is one thing that I do feel is really bad, because it made me feel broken. Cause it's like you see those shirts of you're worth it and the world's better with you. And it's like, I don't feel like that. But, you know, somebody next to me, they got this shirt on, they're smiling, they're happy. So now I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Why am I so broken that I can't be like this person next to me wearing this shirt and we have the same, you know, mental illness? Like, you know, you start to sit there and feed into that type of stuff. And the whole concept around this project I'm trying to do is we all have these inner voices and these inner critics, and those voices can get loud and heavy. You know, you may have already experienced some of this, Dom, when you decided to do this podcast and start this up. You probably heard that voice like, man, nobody's going to listen to this. Nobody's going to be interested in what I have to say. I'm stupid for doing this. Why I'm going to waste my time? You know, that type of voice that taking your ambition and telling you that your ambition is delusion.
Absolutely, I've experienced that. I hear that voice every day. Every time I post on TikTok and get 20 views, I hear it. Every time I
And
post on YouTube and the video might as well be private because nobody fucking sees it, I hear it. Every time I go without comments, without likes, without follows, I hear that voice. Now, I ignore it, right? But
yep,
that's not something that everyone is able to do, nor is it an easy thing to do even for me. So I'm not going to sit there and if somebody's doing the same thing as me, shame them because they're bothered by the lack of engagement. It's natural to be bothered by a lack of support.
correct. You know, it's very natural. And I think that's where, and social media has definitely made this apparent. And, you know, that comparison feeling, because you see somebody, you know, they get on TikTok and they post, you know, them spilling
Repost the
macaroni
same
and
invincible meme 50 fucking times. Protein tubes with the white sauce. Swear to God, if I see that fucking thing, moving on. But yeah, no, you'll see somebody post some absolute slop on TikTok or take like a pre-made text box and get like 50K likes. You put your heart and soul in the content and are lucky if you get one and a negative comment.
exactly. And that becomes, you know, demotivating, because it's like, man, like, am I the one that's wrong? Should I be on this bandwagon of posting the same dumb stuff that everybody else is posting? But, you know, people like you have a real message. And it's like, the sad part about it, real messages like that, it takes a longer time to filter through the bull crap because of the way that society is right now. Again, we talked about not paying attention, not caring, and being self-centered. Sometimes, again, you know, you just looking at people who are posting contests and you listening to the message, and it's like, maybe I don't need to hear this right now, but you know what? I'm gonna like this. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna share it because
Yep.
somebody else needs to hear this. And
Yep.
when they do need to hear this, I already got this. I already got something that maybe could just maybe help them.
Right. I like to think of it as stocking the shelves. And also, too, I've had to remember that I also do a show that goes an average of over an hour long. And, you know, me, I'm willing to sit and watch a documentary or listen to a meditation video or, you know, consume a video essay. A lot of people have had such short attention spans that they are not willing to listen to a podcast like that, even a very good one. But, you know, to relate that back to depression, I think that part of the reason that people aren't able to listen and able to really hear somebody with depression is because of attention spans. Because think about it, listening to someone go in depth on their story is kind of like watching a long form YouTube video. And if you're one of those people that skips through those videos, then that would explain it, you know? It's another
I mean,
byproduct.
yeah, I think that plays a big part. I think also for a lot of humans, they enjoy, you know, talking about themselves. So it's almost like, are they, you know, looking at you? They're not necessarily listening. They're just
Mhm.
waiting for you to stop. And so I can tell you about my problem. So I can talk about myself, and we bring, you know, these conversations onto me because I kind of want to be in the limelight. I've definitely seen that a lot, where people will do that. They just wait to tell you about how bad their life is And it's like, this isn't a competition. Like, I'm
No.
trying to be vulnerable and let you know, hey, I'm in a dark space right now. Hey, can you be here for me? And instead of getting, hey, what you need, or I hear you, I get, well, I seen that you fell down the flight of stairs, but I fell down 2 flights of stairs.
Exactly. It's like, I know you're upset that you don't have any friends, but all my friends threw me in a dumpster one time. It's like, yeah, I feel bad for you too, but this is not why I asked you to come sit here. If I wanted to hear about how your friends threw you in the dumpster, I'd probably ask, hey, have you ever had any bad experiences with friends?
Exactly. And it is, and you hit on a really good topic of, the short attention span. And you can really see the difference in the age differences on like social media for like
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, the age versus TikTok. TikTok is all about those dopamine hits, that
Yep.
scroll, you see something, you find out what it is, dopamine hit, you go on to the next. And unfortunately, or fortunately, messages like yours and mine aren't built for that. We're not built to be like, hey, listen to us, and this is going to be something that's going to help you mentally. By the time we get through this first little, we're already out the whole dopamine hit zone.
Right. It's like, it
So,
doesn't, and you can be the best podcaster ever, and this happens to you because people don't like to listen, and that's the problem.
yeah, and it unfortunately leads to like, society that don't know how to help, don't know how to be there for, don't know how to be present at all. And I think that also leads to the fact of why, you know, things happen so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, with social media, um, in high school, yeah, I may have gotten bullied, but social media wasn't what it was to where, I can be bullied at school, and by the time I get home, 50,000 people done seen it. Uh,
Yep.
and you trying to process that. And, for me, I may have had to worry about the school finding out. Like everybody in the school, we thought that was big and bad. But um, it also leads to not ever really having to critically process and sit and deal with stuff because things are always tossed so rapidly. You can go from, some kind of funny video with AI or random stuff to, like you said, somebody pitching you workout tips, somebody pitching you weight loss, somebody pitching you mental health in a 10-second box that's going to fix your whole
Mm-hmm.
life, to financial stuff, like all in under a minute.
Yep. And, you know, I'm not going to begrudge people for not understanding this type of pain or not being willing to put it into words. I'm not completely anyways, right? It's one of those things where until you feel that you've lost everything that makes life worth living, until your food starts tasting bland, until vibrant colors fade slowly into grays and blacks, until your entire life feels like it just picked up and walked away from you, they'll never understand. Will they stay ignorant? Let's dive in and find out. I want to talk about dark fantasy and how it's able to actually convey these ideas and make them, for lack of a better term, consumable. And, Justin, in your experience in writing dark fantasy, how is dark fantasy able to effectively convey experiences that just can't be put into normal words?
I feel dark fantasy brings to the table something a little bit different than, most fantasies, novels and things, or most genres, I should say. Dark fantasy, is typically, it's already bleak. There's already this
Mm-hmm.
air of hopelessness there. So you're already sitting within this, despair in a sense. So it makes you already primed for dealing with heavier emotions versus, when you're watching or reading something that's like high fantasy, that's like, the elves and the pixies and things are floating around with magical dust,
Yes.
you're in this happy mindset. So when everything goes bleak, you're just like, and then you don't really want to stay there because you were in this happy high through most of the movie or most of the night. So I feel dark fantasy opens this door to really bring in a different emotional wave in a different teaching ability to teach things that other fantasy and genres don't. For my work, the way that I looked at it is I wanted, if I was describing my work like a person, I would describe the world building as the body. Then I wanted the mental health to be like the underclothes. So it's there, but you don't see it until you strip off the outfit or the outer layer of dark fantasy. So it's meant to be caught by people who've experienced it. If you experience, you've already stripped off that layer. You're seeing this. This isn't just, this character going through the typical angry sadness or, quote unquote emo phase. This is somebody who was abandoned dealing with trauma, and see that. And that's where I took a lot of time to really look at my work and see, okay, it was already taking this turn from what I've dealt with, but this allowed me to teach without teaching per se, or to teach without it being clinical. It's
Yes.
readable and digestible on a level because it reads like dark fantasy, but it's also teaching you of what people are dealing with who do have these mental illnesses, where you can point to a character and be like, do you understand what it's like to be someone with PTSD? Well, no, I don't have it. Did you like this character? Yeah, they were dealing with this and they were having this trouble, and you can describe this character down to a T, every aspect about them. Well, that's
It's like,
me. That's exactly.
congratulations.
Exactly. You understand what it's like to be someone with PTSD. And now you have this emotional resonance with this character or this novel, because a lot of time when you are reading something like that, there is people you like, there's people you hate, there's different connections. And that's been, as I've been writing, that's been my mission, is to bring that awareness in a way that isn't obvious to people. I'm not saying my book and novels are, actual therapy, but I do feel like it's important to bridge the need for people to understand that there is importance to, doing positive things with their mental health. Now, how that looks to you may be different. For some people, it could be doing a podcast. There was a veteran I seen that for his mental health, it wasn't going to a therapist, but podcasting, talking to people, explaining what he'd been through, how he's handling it, was for him very therapeutic. And I feel that's where dark fantasy can really shine, where other fantasies in other genres, would break down. You look at romance, you can't get super duper into the whole, deeply into mental health all the time, because people want to see the kissing, the hugging. They want the relationship to make,
Right.
make up. They want the warm and fuzzy, like, where dark fantasy, like I said, there's times where the whole world just ends and nothing good happens at the end of it.
Right. And, I really like what you said, that it's like you can basically, you don't have to say a single word. You can describe it, you can show it, and you can throw people in the actual mind of that character and in their everyday thoughts. And it also lets you express what you're going through, because now you're not talking about your own stuff, which can often lead to like certain mental blocks and things like that. You're talking about your character's stuff. You're trying to describe an elf. You're not trying to describe you. So then it becomes a little easier, because you're looking at it through a magnifying glass.
Yes, you actually hit on something that's extremely important there. So that's actually like a narrative therapy term, and it's really a therapy process called externalization,
Mm-hmm.
where you take something and you externalize it. So you put it on something else. Externalization, distancing, there's other terms for it, but basically you're distancing yourself from the problem. So it's not internal and doesn't feel as heavy to you, because it's not you going through it. It's, this doll or this person, and, we've seen that sometimes naturally in TV shows or things where somebody talking about a heavy subject, they're like, well, so let's say I have a friend, and they say I have a friend when it's really them when they're trying to deal with something heavy, because it makes it able to be discussed in a easier, as opposed to saying I'm dealing with this. So that was really, a very important insight for people to understand that this is something that is therapeutic, and it does help for you to talk. So being able to relate to characters, that works. That was another building block that I'm not at the point of like putting out, because I do want to have some actual, legit validation and therapeutic guardrails around, but I wanted to build something called the safe thread. And what it is basically what you were just describing. My characters, if you really do look and read through them, you can match them to mental illnesses. Like, they legitimately do have mental illness in my story. And I wanted to build something where it allowed people to use that distance. So instead of saying, I have PTSD, or I'm dealing with abandonment issues, or I'm dealing with survivor's guilt, they could point to one of my characters,
Right.
Vincent. I feel like Vincent did. And it explains everything to the other person, whether it's a therapist, a friend. You can read about this character and then understand what this person is kind of dealing with. Maybe not put you fully in their shoes, but at least get some gleam of insight of how their mind is kind of working.
Yep. And, you know, that's very interesting because, I mean, you do convey very real messages. Like I said, in The Burning Guilt, our main character is someone who's rushed into a burning building to save people despite what could have happened. And I don't want to spoil anything. Go read it. But, he ends the story feeling a pain of those he couldn't save. This is something that people who constantly help other people, to kind of circle back to the hero thing, this is something that people who constantly help other people feel, but they're not able to put it necessarily into words in a way that you could understand if you just like asked them man on the street style. But give them time to write a compelling work like this, and now you're exactly in those shoes. You now know the hollowness that comes when, yes, you provided this safety, you provided this safe space for all those people, but there were also people who burned up.
Yeah.
And, you have to grasp with the fact that technically you maybe could have saved them if you'd have just pushed a little more. That's what a lot of veterans have to go through, to get back to that.
Yeah, that's correct. Which that piece of work actually came from a true story. And in this case, the story was about a civilian who did that. It wasn't quite the same number, but it was. I think he ended up saving 14 people by himself.
Okay, so not far off.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting watch for me watching, the interview, because you could I don't feel he understood, but as the interview kept progressing, while he could say, I did this, and he was explaining the story, you could see him coming back to those he couldn't. And he would say, but I wish I could have got to this person. And then they'll continue, but you saved this many. And he's like, well, yeah, I did this, I did that. But man, if I would have had something else, I would have got to these people. And you could see him just coming back to that. And it's not like he sits there and tells you, hey, I'm feeling guilty about this. But if you pay attention, you could see that guilt on his face. Yeah, he's happy about it, but those he couldn't weighs heavily. And I do
Yes.
feel like the voice actor on that, Zachary Hoffman, did an amazing job really bringing that
My
to
God.
you, that feeling of throughout the whole story.
Yes, he took it to the next level. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a story I've read where I've been that immersed.
And that's the feeling I want, people to feel when they're going through these folklore. And, not only do you look at it from a civilian standpoint, but then, when we talked about earlier in the story, earlier on the podcast, about firefighters having a higher suicidal rate than police officers. When you listen to that and you think about it from a logical standpoint, it's not surprising. The fact that you may have seen someone get burnt up, and it's not like they, got shot and boom, you're hearing, you're smelling, you're seeing, and knowing that you cannot do anything, that would be mentally breaking. And this is where I started really wanting to write these different pieces. The different folklore I write are normally pertaining to something, whether it's an occupation or whether it's a person or particular people dealing with these things that aren't really paid attention to. I have one that's dealing with, a mother having postpartum.
Yes, I saw that. The Hollow Mother.
Correct. And then the burning guilt was dealing with, like I said, even though it was a civilian, it really touches on, what firefighters deal with, what veterans, police officers may deal with. I have the wolves who stayed, which deal with caregivers and people who are on the forefront and are forced to be like the leader. And that weight and that feeling of not being able to fail, because, and this would resonate with probably a lot of males, are breadwinners, because there are women breadwinners of household now, where you feel like you cannot fail, because if you fail, everything goes. And that weight gets immense. You lose your job, or you feel like you're on the precipice of losing your job, and that mental stress, you don't feel like you can come and necessarily talk to your significant other, or if you don't have a significant other, you don't want to put that burden on your kids. So you just, try to smile through it. And it does, it's super impactful. So what I've tried to do is basically go and write things from experiences I've had or people I know, or I've been blessed to be able to kind of look at people and really embody those emotions and put those into words, even if they can't, and, open people's eyes to what other people deal with.
Yes, and I really like how descriptive you are and how you really make an effort to truly, like, you capture all the five senses, and you take the time to do that without bordering into like lengthy prose like how a lot of regular fantasy does. I really just, again, it's a wonderful type of story writing. And I'll just say this: there have been there have been worse pantsers out there. Have you heard of Five Nights at Freddy's yet? It's like, you want to talk about a pantser that does it wrong. But
Oh boy.
yeah, do you have any final thoughts for listeners out there struggling with a depression so deep that it defies words?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I always like to go back to for people who are, struggling is, number one, you aren't broken. And I know it may feel like you are, but you aren't. Now, again, I'm not one for the toxic positivity, because everyone take their own time. So I'm not going to be like, you need to go out and be happy. You need to know that, people love you, because I don't know their circumstance. But one thing I can say, that you aren't broken. And I know that because, you know, once you get out of that spill, once you kind of start to get back, it's a whole different mindset. Your mind right now is just, working differently. But, the biggest thing for me when talking to people who are in these places is to know that you're seen. Even if no one else that see you, I'm making a place that I wish I had, where I didn't feel seen, that I didn't feel heard, and not all the time is it on purpose, but things happen. People don't understand what you're going through. And that's why I built the Vaelorinverse, for people who didn't feel seen, who felt alone, for them to come and, it's not interacting like right here like we are, but it's for you to have these negative thoughts. And I have a place called Whisper the Veil, where you could put your negative thoughts in, and you can see that other people are having these negative thoughts as well. So it's a kind of a different instead of it being a happy place, it's like seeing that, okay, I'm going through shit, but okay, I'm not going through this just walking this alone either. Now there still may be some things that lead to where you have to, before it gets better, it may take months, it may take some years, but, you just understand that you're not sitting in that dark hole alone is different. Like I said, just knowing that you're seen, and all it takes sometimes is for somebody to be next to you. They don't even have to say nothing, but just knowing at least one person is next to you could be the whole difference.
Yep. And where can they find the Vaelorinverse? Because you guys really need to read this. You guys really need to absorb this content, because I believe that it'll be very beneficial in your understanding of just what people like us go through.
Well, yeah. So, like I said, I built, a whole universe, for people. And so that's at Vaelorinverse.com. There's doors there. So you just, you choose your door and you go through the different doors when you're ready. If you're interested in the story itself, then there's a door for that. If you need to remember someone that you may have lost, for veterans who may have unfortunately had a comrade that they couldn't, bury, there's a memorial wall for people to remember those people, whether it's pets, veterans, adults, children. You can honor those people where other people can honor them alongside you. And then
Yes.
I have folklore for people who, just want to be seen and understand that they are seen. In the folklore, again, as we talked about before, hit different occupations, different people, different struggles. And then I'm also at the point where I'm putting together an apparel line, and it's different again because it's not the whole feeling behind it is to make people part of something, part of a movement, to feel like they're part of a home. But it's not just I want to sell you something, but once you step into my universe, I want you to feel like you have somewhere you belong. And the apparel is just a way of physically taking that universe with you. The Forged by Grit and Grace shirt. And then I have, the firefighter shirt that lets, as firefighters, let them know that, when that fire, they're the ones that's stopping that fire, that's protecting people. It's just different things that people can physically carry with them, if they just need something not to feel alone, if they're out and about, or if they just want to wear it to feel like they're still connected to something.
Yeah. Everybody should go check that out, especially those who are currently struggling, because I think that you'll find that you have an ally in this struggle in more ways than one. But thanks for coming on, Justin. You've been a fantastic guest. You've made a very great episode, and I can only hope that when we put this one out, that it can resonate with at least one person. All we need is one. That's all I care about is one.
I agree. And it's been great. You asked some great questions. Honestly, I won't even say you asked some, questions. You really you put that heart and that soul into this conversation. It wasn't, a general podcast that people do, for content. You could hear it in your voice that this really resonated with you and was something that, was on your heart, your soul, and your mind. So I appreciate the time, Don, and this was the best podcast that I've been a part of so far.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my approach, and if you're wondering about my approach, it's literally just it's like I consume a lot of podcasts. I watch what they're doing and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's literally my whole thing. So I'm glad that I was able to resonate with somebody doing that. But anywho, that's all for today's show. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. My socials and Justin's website, where you can find the Vaelorinverse, will be linked in the description, as well as who helped put this episode together. Follow us everywhere so you don't miss a beat, and tune in next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for an all-new What's Going On with Dapper Don. You don't want to miss what I have in store. Peace out.